It is time for a professional match of StarCraft 2. What I've got for you today is a best of 3 series of top level Zerg versus Protoss. Where in game number 1 we find ourselves on beautiful ley lines, spawning right here in the top right hand corner of the map. Playing with the red Zerg pieces, we have none other than Rogue and his opponent down in the bottom left with the blue as... no. We're looking at none other than Zoun's main Nexus. One of these days, I'm going to be able to cast a game of StarCraft 2 perfectly. But today will not be that day. What is this? Zoun taking a page out of Hero's book when it comes to positioning the very first pylon. Now this may be one of the most cursed looking pylons I've ever seen, man. Why would we ever put it over there? I guess we put the cyber core over here and then we have kind of an exposed little choke point over. I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm already being critical. That being said, Zoun has been extremely good lately. I mean, maybe taking a page out of Hero's book as far as the walling off goes is not what I would do, but there's no denying that Zoun has been playing some fantastic StarCraft 2 as of late. He's going up against a Zerg player, though, who's been looking powerful. I've been really enjoying Rogue's Protoss, or sorry, his Zerg versus Terran in particular. I think his Zerg versus Terran is amazing. I am not 100% sold on his ZVP just yet, but he keeps trying different things, and we'll have to see what flavor of Rogue we're going to be getting here today, because he's not afraid to go ahead and mix it up. I like that little play here from Zoun. Moving it all the way onto the edge of the main base. Cannot quite see whether or not there is indeed a hatchery building on the low ground. Apparently on ley lines you can't get that vision from there, but we'll move down to the low ground here in just a second. Get the confirmation that everything is normal. You're always just a little bit concerned here as a Protoss player. You never really truly know if there could be a hatchery building right here. It's uncommon. But you know what? It is something that happens every once in a while. I guess now with Dark off to the military. No, so it's actually a little bit odd. I just got a replay pack from the Kijkwijzer Festival 6.0. And those replays were released, I think, about 5-6 weeks or so after the tournament concluded. And in some of those replays, Dark is still playing. Is it weird right now for me to go ahead and cast a Dark series? Even though the man is already off to the military for like a month? Maybe longer? I don't know. Maybe like 2 months it is. I don't know. It's been a little bit. It's like he's playing from the grave. You know what I mean? I mean, he's not dead, but it does kind of feel like I'm casting games. If I do decide to cast a Dark series from a man that doesn't actively compete at this point in time because he's doing his mandatory military service. I don't know. I may go ahead and check them out anyways because I know that there are some bangers in some of those games, and ultimately, well, Dark is a very entertaining player. Either way, we've got ourselves a Stargate opener here for Zoun in this particular match. Are we gonna go Oracle? Boom. All right, feels late. He needed 150 gas right now to start that bad boy, opting to go for 3 units out of the gateway here. Nothing all too weird. 2 adepts, 1 stonker. We do have a Zergling going in, and that stonker immediately. Ooh, being nice. What about the drone harassment over here? Can we get 1? Nope. Rogue so far. Okay, we do end up losing 1 here, but Rogue so far. 2? Okay. Rogue so far doing a pretty good job controlling those units. Oracle number 1 is available. Oracle number 2 gets queued up as well on the back of this. Nexus on the low ground is going to be starting up nice and early. Not the fastest possible Nexus in 2025. 3 minutes and 50 seconds or so. Does mean that Protoss generally has delayed themselves by a little bit, but nothing all too weird. I mean, he's maybe a second or 2 off. Look at this wall off. Why would we ever, like, when you think about it, right? Your most commonly made pylon in StarCraft 2 is your first one. Why in the world then, if there's nothing else going on, would you place the pylon over here? Now the cyber core is exposed, this gateway is awkwardly disjointed. I know we don't really see bailing busts very much in 2025, but it doesn't matter that much, I guess, but it is that weird laxness in the early game that we do see from some of the Korean players in particular, as we have a Glaives follow-up. Okay, so good old Oracles into good old Glaives. Zoun is trying to see if he can get this game over with fast. He's looking at about a 7-minute GG, if it is up to him right now. Oracles swoop into the main base, but there's a Sport Crawler there together with a Queen. And Brenda takes very good care of her Brood. Now, I find this an odd decision. to be pushing right now with a bunch of adepts. So yeah, he killed a few drones, but he also did lose 3 adepts. Why would you then follow it up with more adepts? Right? Like, you're just about to get a massive power spike on the adepts, and you've just given up 3 adepts. Now, there is this weird thing in StarCraft 2 where, I guess as a Zerg player right now, you've just killed 3 adepts from the opponent, so therefore you would assume that the opponent is not gonna go for an adept follow-up, because it doesn't really make any sense. It's like losing a bunch of Marines right before Stimpack and Combat Shield finishes up. It doesn't really line up. Either way, Zoun is going to double down, and... oh, accidental rep god. Zoun's gonna double down. Actually, apparently some players say that you're supposed to pronounce his name not as Zoun, but it's like Zoun, or like Zoun, or Zoun. I've even heard somebody pronounce this username dangerously close to John. Which, you know, I don't know how you're... I'm just gonna go with Zoun, okay? That's how you would pronounce it in Dutch. John definitely is incorrect, though. I will let you... Maybe it's like the Korean version of John. Maybe... okay, here we go. Adept, swoop in. Spore Crawler. Yoink. Yeah, that's not gonna happen, dude. Spore Crawler to complete the wall off. Stasis Ward over here. Oh, God. This is just about to get very messy. Adepts do shade back once again. Brenda is shooting their little spines from behind the Spore Crawler. Drones want to escape, and they do get... they do get the little uprooting there. This is a very funky early game for both players. I've got a feeling, though, nothing's really gonna come for this, or of this for either of them. So funny how only Terrans in StarCraft have figured out a reliable way to make doors. For Zergs and for Protoss, it's basically always structures and units. Okay, Adepts do swoop in. A bunch of drones do fall, but it's gonna be quite costly. Stasis Ward, this one could be pretty big. Okay, nope, good reaction there by Rogue. As he is doing a great job as well, cleaning up these units. Yeah, both players are already preparing for the next stage in this game. And it will be Hydraling Bane going up against, well, a ground-based Protoss army with Psionic Storm. Do you think StarCraft 2 would be better off if every race had something like a supply depot that you just like lower and raise if you need to? I mean, that might be the biggest buff to Protoss that we've ever seen, man. Like having some reliable way to wall off. There's no denying that even at the highest level, we see Zerglings running into the base all the freaking time, which is honestly very sloppy, but yeah. You'd imagine we would have mastered it by now, right? But sometimes when the all-army hotkeying gets a little bit too intense, the Zerglings are allowed into the base. Alright, Storm is gonna finish, and Rogue scouts this immediately. Now, seeing that Storm at this point is already here, means that you can't easily attack with Hydraling Bane. Hydraling Bane is a powerful unit composition, and it can hit like an absolute truck, but also they have very little hit points, right? So Storm deals 80 damage if you stand in the Storm for the entire duration. Hydras have 90 HP in total. Zerglings have 35. Banelings don't have a whole lot either, so you have to be very cautious here as a Zerg player, engaging a Protoss army like this, especially off creep. Now, if it goes across the map and we fight on creep, then suddenly Hydraling Bane is really strong. I think, though, that Zoun is likely going to be trying to move around the creep, because he knows that engaging on it is going to be tough. We did have a Baneling Nest. Baneling Nest, though, is, yeah, it's done researching, but we don't have any Banelings themselves. Instead, we have a Lurker Den coming up right now together with a Hive. In the meantime, on the other side of the map, even though Zoun is making a... what looks like a pretty committed move out onto the map, he's going into a fleet beacon of his own. So, we have both players on 4 bases right now, and both of them are ready to transition towards a little bit of a longer game. Perfect. Gives me an opportunity to take a sip of my coffee. I don't even want to tell you the amount of times I've casted games of StarCraft 2, and then I finish and I realize my coffee's gone cold. Pretty sure that's a sin somewhere. I know. I will have you know that oftentimes I will still drink the coffee out of shame when it's cold. I feel like a savage and a bit of a caveman, but cavemen were known for their caffeine addiction, right? Anyways, here we go. Lynx trying to go around the site. High Templar, though. We're like, nope. We're going to be storming you if you get even remotely close. Tempest coming up. Mama ship coming up here, too. That's a pretty quick mothership, actually. All things considered. Generally, we see the mothership most often in 2025 as like the final aid supply to round out a unit composition. Now, Zoun obviously is pretty close to maxing out, but this is still a mid-gamey unit composition. He doesn't really have a lot of Skytools yet. He doesn't really have a ton of units yet. Stalkers and Zealots are here to be replaced ultimately, but we're going to try and sneak out the mothership, and you know what? The main problem is that it takes a long time to produce. If, however, you get it out, it is well worth getting early. Spire coming up on the back of this now, too. Ultralisk Cavern also here building for Rogue. It's like we have a bit of a gentleman's agreement where we hit each other in the face for a moment, but now we're transitioning away and we're actually just doing the StarCraft 2 equivalent of like a 15 minutes no rush. Even though there have been a lot of, you know, dead units already. Neither player really committing to a whole lot of mid-game at all. We're gonna do a bit of aggression in the early game, but then skip the mid-game and go straight to the late game, it seems. Greater Spire, by the way, coming up too. So we go Ultras and Greater Spire, Ultralisks and Brute Lords. Zerglings trying to get the wraparound. Ooh. I always find it ambitious when Protoss players storm their own units, but I quite like it there. Allow the Lynx to get the wraparound, storm, blink away with the Stalkers. Okay. Now the main goal right now for Rogue, though, even though these fights don't really seem to achieve too much, is to try and soft contain this Protoss player. Zoun is still on 4 bases, which is enough for him to max out once, maybe twice. But you don't really have a ton of resources at your disposal. Then again, he's been building up his infrastructure. So rather than building up a 5th Nexus here, he's gone into quick upgrades. With that very cursed positioning on the Cyber Core, he's already going into the +2 air. He's going into double Robo facility. We have 3 Stargates, like that Fleet Beacon like I was talking about earlier, the Templar Archives. We've got a little bit of everything here. Quite interesting, actually. 2nd Cyber Core coming up, too. Here we go, though. Now the armies are getting real scary. Good split right here by the Protoss player, too. Some of the lesser important units, but I like that he still brought an Archon here in the mix. Those units, though, are sent out to die. Sounds a little bit sad, a little bit morbid, but when they're gone, they're going to be replaced with more important units at this stage in the game. It's kind of expensive though, man. That was a lot of units dying. Zerg didn't really lose anything there. 5th Nexus on the low ground. Rogue normally in Zerg versus Terran is very fond of the... Man, I talked about the Cybercore positioning in the early game. Can't believe we actually see it going down here to our random bunch of units. So messy. Big Ultra push here at the bottom of the map too. It all comes down to that freaking pylon, man. I'm telling you guys, this first pylon, absolute garbage. I don't like it at all. It's so silly. All right, Ultra's trying to move in. We do need detection, though, if the mothership decides to activate its cloaking field, which it did just now. Time Warp does reduce the attack speed of units inside of the bubble, too, by 50%, so you have to be a little bit careful. Although Ultras actually may just be ignoring that because of the Frenzy passive. I'm actually not exactly sure how the interaction works between the mothership's Time Warp and the Ultras. I would imagine the Ultras don't care. Yeah, they have a passive called Frenzy that basically allows them to ignore a lot of the rules of StarCraft 2. Which is why Ultras don't really care a lot about, well, generally any movement-based ability or like any movement-based spell that is adjusting those values. So I would imagine Time Warp is also ignored by them, but anyways. It's not super common, actually, that we see Ultras in the late game. It can be really strong, so if you can make this full, like, Ultra Lurker-based army, right, and you kill all of the units on the ground, the Corruptors can kill everything up in the air pretty easily. This is a weird combination of units, though, because normally, with Zerg, we see either Lurkers or Ultras. Both is not what we normally have going here. Well, even though we don't have the mass Nidus Worm style yet, I was trying to point that out earlier, Rogue is very fond of the mass Nidus Worm, mass Overseer style in Zerg versus Terran. We don't have any Niduses yet at this point in time, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to be making this many Overseers, if we're going to be seeing some of those in the mix here in just a moment too. Alright. +2 air weapons. Attempt number 2 coming up. Ooh, big circling surround. This could be a disaster here for Zoun. Zoun has been losing so many units, and that was 5 Immortals going down to a bunch of Zerglings. Phenomenal exchange right there for Rogue. Really doesn't get a whole lot more, well, powerful for Zerglings like that. The reason to be making Immortals, by the way, is just to counter the Ultralisks. 7 Immortals destroys Ultras. 2 Immortals, I mean, still pretty good against Ultras, but obviously not nearly as powerful. Double Robo, though, still being handy. And so far, Zoun has been slipping up a little bit with some of those unit donations. Losing a little bit more than I would have liked, but then again, if you look at the resources that both players have at their disposal right now, Rogue has not been taking those exchanges for free. Look at the Immortal, dude. You see that? That was one shot from the Immortal right there. Boom! Well, we do have to manually hit it onto the Ultralisk. If it's going to be targeting Zerglings, obviously it's not nearly as useful. Little fight as well on the right side of the map. Zerglings and Zealots engaging against one another. This is that little glitch on the map where people think their monitor breaks. This is not your monitor breaking, it's a glitch on ley lines. Alright. Infestor's coming up. And we have a Brute Lord transition too. So Brute Lord Infestor will be Rogue's weapon of choice. Static defense building. Immortal production still underway. So Rogue is effectively trying to deal with this Protoss army by quick tech transitions, right? So he's trying to quickly switch his army composition up to hope that maybe Zoun is a little bit too invested into, well, for example, making a anti-Ultralisk army. Then suddenly the Brute Lord and the Infestor shows up and they can deal a lot of damage. Then again, though, this is a Death Bally type of army. It looks like there was an attack over here in the middle of the map too that I just barely missed, where Rogue did end up killing one of the bases there of the Protoss player. Both players, though, still pretty rich. Oh, we have more Immortals dying. That's so sloppy. Okay, looks like they will be able to escape just barely. The rest of the Protoss army getting close. Oh, we fight through the storms, through all of these locations. I don't know, man. Ultras are putting in quite a bit of work. Immortals not retargeted right there onto the Ultralisk, and that means that they can kill up a lot of those ground units, but in the meantime, yeah, a bunch of the Tempests and a bunch of the Corruptors have been engaging against each other too. I don't think that was the best fight there for Rogue in the end. Even though Zoun could have had a lot more value out of his army, he still ended up doing pretty fine. Yeah. Ultimately, he snipes a base after losing the mirrored position on the other side of the map. I'm actually kind of surprised that Rogue did not play more aggressively in the mid game, because there's a lot of Zerg players out there that try to avoid this phase in the game to the absolute best of their abilities. I've been seeing this in a lot of games as well. Not just at the pro level, but also on the ladder. The majority of the Zerg players out there desperately try to avoid this exact phase in the game. Rogue has basically embraced it. He's saying, yo, I'm not gonna attack you too much in the mid game, we'll just go straight up towards the late game. And because of that, I feel like this is immediately better for Zoun. Zerg really has been struggling, especially in the late game, against Protoss. It's just a much more... It's a different dynamic than it used to be like a year or two ago. Obviously, it's something that has been consistently, well, changed ever since, I guess, the removal of the Infested Terran, I want to say, if we want to go that far back. But I feel like that sort of marked the beginning of Zerg players struggling a lot more in the late game. And every patch since then has been a little bit better for Protoss over time in the late game. So the most recent changes, of course, I think the ones that are worth noting the most. The fact that the Tempest is a little bit cheaper in supply. So Tempests are just better than they once used to be. Like, you can basically squeeze out more stuff alongside them, which is really nice, so they're one supply less. And then, of course, the Mothership is no longer abductable. Now, Zerg did get the Microbial Shroud buff. So now Microbial Shroud sticks to units and all that, but I mean, don't really know if it's really that big of a deal. Either way, it's one of the reasons why we see Zerg players generally try to end the game before this point. But Rogue has decided to embrace it. So let's see what he can do. Lurkers once more brought back into the mix. I like it. Fight over here with one Lurker as well on the high ground. Just trying to be as annoying as possible. Lurkers, though, are going to get destroyed now with Zoun getting close by. He does have detection. Both the Revelation as well as the Observer here being extremely useful. And I quite like what he did here. So Zoun has gone into Tempest initially, and then as soon as he finished up the +2 air weapons, Right now he's already at +3 attack. But +2 air attacks is the big one for Protoss flying units, especially for carriers. That's when he started switching away from Tempest into carriers instead. So these units have sort of been the forgotten unit of Protoss as of late at the pro level. But we slowly see him being mixed in once more. I do like how heavily focused here Zoun is on those late game upgrades. I've been casting, for example, a bunch of games featuring Classic. And Classic has been very successful in the late game too, but he doesn't emphasize upgrades at all. Wow, really? We're gonna dance here with lurkers? Okay. I like that Zoun is actually emphasizing those upgrades. So a quick double Cybercore to really get those upgrades rolling nice and early. Double Forge as well instead of the main base, despite playing a Skytools-based army. He's just getting everything that he needs. When you're this rich, right? When you've got this many minerals and gas, I mean, you may as well. May as well get all the upgrades going so you can easily make a transition. Because there are moments where sometimes you want to consider going back into full Stalker to, like, quickly drive it home. Okay, so Nidus Worm coming up right now here for Rogue, as both players are desperately trying to take their half of the map. Ultras putting in a lot of work. And Ultras are, of course, pretty quick, right? So, okay, he decides to engage here on the other side instead. I don't know if there's enough Ultras to really make their way through this base. Zoun just decides to warp in a bunch of Stalkers to try and deal with those units. So, he gets an expansion in the top left-hand corner of the map. Well, it's not really losing that much. I mean, this looks kind of bad, but it's not the end of the world at all. He doesn't really lose that much in the meantime at home. More Zealots here, working on a bunch of drones. Brute Lord count, though, is growing. We're going all the way up towards 11. And I gotta say, so far, Zoun's bank is really not amazing. It's partially due to the fact that he's been upgrading literally everything. Again, I don't really mind that too much. But he has been losing quite a few units too. Like, he's been very active out onto the map. Trading out a ton of Stalkers and Zealots. I do feel like this is one of those games, though, where if we don't pay attention to the resources in the bank for a couple of minutes, there's a chance that we suddenly see Protoss sitting at, like, 6k or whatever. Like, 6k gas, 6k minerals. Okay, maybe 6,000 minerals is a little bit much, but... He's now maxed out. And he has his ultimate army. He's nearly done upgrading his units, so he doesn't really need to spend a lot more resources on things at this point in time. So we can really see those banks going up. Rogue has also arrived at his maxed out army. So what is the maxed out army? Well, it's Infestors. There's a bunch of Vipers in the mix. We have Corruptors. We have Brute Lords. He's already fully maxed as far as the upgrades go for all of those units. So we have started spending some money here onto Nidus networks instead. There are still 77 drones, though, here for Rogue. I don't mind it too much, but there is certainly a point where you want to start swapping out some of those workers for attacking units instead. Obviously, you cannot go past the 200 supply count, so... Well, you can with some extractor tricks and all that, but... Yeah, we're now starting to send out a bunch of units here, too, for Zoun, just to lower the worker count a little bit and to replace some of those units with attacking units instead. Now, Rogue, in these kind of positions, though, is a big fan of just putting down mass Nidus Worms, mass Overseers, and spend his resources that way. I do think it is important to have at least some minerals and gas in the bank so you can remax. These are stupidly expensive armies, though. If you look at the army value right now in the top left, both players have massive armies, and neither player is even remotely close to being able to remax. +1 air coming up as well for the flying units. We're actually a little bit late with those. I mentioned that he was already maxed in that regard. He was not, my bad. Only just now starting up the flyer carapace. +3 air armor, though, coming up here for Zoun. This is the final upgrade that he can make. He even already has +3 shields done, which is usually the last upgrade that we see from Protoss. I guess he ended up losing one of his Cybercores earlier, right? Remember that one? Ay. Okay. So, it comes down to the fight. Who can micro their army better in the main engagement? All of the bases except for one have been taken at this point in time. Nice abductions right there by Rogue. We need to see these armies clash. Fungal growth versus feedback. Storm versus parasitic bomb. Brute lords versus skytals. Archons, I guess we can say, going up against the corruptors. We have still got a bunch of immortals in the mix too. Not actually that useful in this type of army at all. Ooh, both players looking for the perfect opportunity here. One fungal, one storm can really set off an entire engagement, right? Like, that may just be the trigger that we need to see here before both players actually decide to fight. It's so dangerous, though, because neither of them really wants to mess this up. Super easy to mess this up. If you could get a big stasis ward, for example, and then fight the opponent, life is way more comfortable. Okay, well, there's still this base over here at the bottom of the map. The fact that that one is not yet taken makes life way better. Oh, he forgot about the tectonic destabilizer. Gets it going right now. He's a little bit scared of the fungal growth here. Hatchery left at a good chunk of HP. Oh, I was gonna say, that's a little bit overly ambitious. There is an observer sieged up here, so you can actually see these units coming in. A little bit of a Zergling Zealot scramble in the bottom right-hand corner. Let's see. How much damage can we do? The hatchery is falling, and there we go. Those feedbacks are so powerful. The Infestor is one of the very few units in the game that actually dies to a feedback when it's at full energy. And even though a couple of High Templar did die there, I think that was a very good exchange for Zoun, because he also got a hatchery for his troubles. Okay, 50% of the map has been acquired now for both players, right? I mean, they've basically mined the same amount of resources up until this point. We really should see the +2 air armor here as well for Rogue, actually. Who's just he's gonna give up on some of those less important bases. This is, by the way, the type of army here for both players that does require about, I want to say 4 or 5 control groups to effectively micro. Whether or not they both use that many is the question, of course. But what it does come down to is that these are difficult armies to control. The Zerg spellcasters, they need to be on separate control groups generally. You gotta put the Vipers together with the Overseers and then the Corruptors. Likewise here for Protoss as well. Sure, you could be putting the Mothership together with all the other units on the flying hotkey, right? But preferably you do want to be able to use its spells, and you do want to have the Tempests together with the Oracles used as a team as well. You do want to make sure that your Archons are underneath. You want to make sure that your High Templar are separately hotkeyed. What about your Observers? Do you just set those up and forget about them? There's a lot of little optimizations that can make all the difference. 3 additional Stargates coming up. Okay. So this is basically Zoun saying, yo, even if you kill my main base, I'm going to be able to remax. He's preparing for the remax too. Both players know that they're going to be very likely to lose a bunch of units. Now, this is Rogue being a bit cheeky, rather. Going after an expansion that is normally considered to be the Protoss' base. He didn't get that base up for all too long in the top left. So we're trying to get it in the opposite location instead. And it is down right now. Zoun has seen it, though. He knows that it's up. A couple of Zealots in the main base are a necessity, too, because the Zerglings are here. And it looks like, okay, some abductions here did complete. We did have a recall, too, of some of the, well, important Protoss units. And they're going to be used to get rid of these Niduses in the main base once and for all. That does mean, though, that Zoun's army is a little bit disjointed. I wouldn't mind it if you waited for a minute and get those units back into the main control groups, because these are expensive units to not have part of your army. Both players, they have started building up their banks. Base over here has been found. Zoun is going to start chipping away at some of the units. He's not too concerned for it, it seems. Probes are being sacrificed here as both players want to start, well, just building up more and more army supply. They have enough of a bank. They don't really need a whole lot more. Tectonic Destabilizers doubles the damage that Tempests deal against structures. It's phenomenal here. Super nice, kills that base with ease. Now, this is starting to become a bit worrisome though here for Rogue. Those carriers are just going to deal way more damage. We only have +1 armor research for the flying units, and that is a major oversight. Zerglings here being traded out for, well, some units that cost gas too. Gas, of course, is the main limiting resource for both players here, so they're trying to build that up primarily. If you can trade Zerglings for anything that costs gas, or if you can trade Zealots for anything likewise on the other side of the map, that is a worthwhile trade, up until a certain standard, obviously. But this is mostly just both players running minerals into one another. I'm a little surprised Zoun has given the opponent this base. He knows that it's up. He knows that it's been mining for a little while already. He could easily have killed it. I guess he's killed this expansion on the high ground instead, which is fine. But, okay. An Ultra here. A few Ultras actually on the production tab too. They're going to be used to harass those expansions. Maybe they can do what those Zerglings cannot. All the static defense for both players, be it spines, be it photon cannons, all of it is mineral only. So that's why we see quite a bit of it at this phase in the game. Okay. Yeah, if he just sneezes on the hatch, it's dead. Nice abductions though by Rogue. I feel like we've been seeing quite a few of those. Man, I just recently did cast a phenomenal game between Serral and Classic, actually, on this exact same map. Where it came down to the exact... Well, it came down to the absolute wire, right? Like some of the best StarCraft 2 we've ever seen. And this is kind of cooking up a very similar meal right now. Like, we have a very similar setup for both players. A lot more Ultras, though, in this game than what we saw Serral produce. A lot more upgrades as well for Zoun than what we saw Classic produce, but... Neural Parasite coming up. This is, of course, one of the few abilities that can really change the tide of battle if used effectively. He did also, by the way, continue the +2, so that's nice. Corruptor count is looking extremely high. Yeah, so the idea here is to keep the Vipers on the same control group with the Corruptors and then also the Overseers. So obviously feedback, right, is your main danger here as the Zerg player. Because technically speaking, feedback outranges the Viper's abduction. However, if you put the Overseers on the control group, since Overseers are also spellcasters, it's difficult for Protoss to actually land the feedback. Because if you're not paying very special attention against clumped up units, it's pretty much impossible. You might not be able to feedback the Viper, but you end up wasting your energy on the High Templar on, well, feedbacking Overseers instead. Which obviously, ooh, he does not care about. Is this the moment we've been waiting for? Some massive storms go down, but here we go. Rogue decides to swoop in. There's a lot of Archons underneath, though, that are going to be working on all of those flying Zerg units with ease. Corruptors decide to join in, too. Very hard to say exactly what is going on in these fights, but I can't help but notice that the Zerg army supply absolutely plummeted. And just like that, it's those Archons, man, destroying the Corruptors just like that. In the blink of an eye. And the blink of a bunch of Stalkers. Haha. The Zerg army disappeared. And Zoun obtains the victory in game number 1. Brilliant game right there by Zoun. I feel like the Immortal donations were a little rough and a bit unfortunate, but other than that, he played that game really, really nicely. Yeah, there's a lot of ways for Zerg players to harass the Protoss in the late game, right? With like mass Overlord drops and maybe mass Nidus Worm play. You can maybe chip away at some of those Protoss structures over time. But ultimately, as a Zerg, you have to be able to deal with the main army of the Protoss player. And we have seen a lot of games over the months lately where Zergs max out on what is looking like a perfect army for them. And then, well, the units clash, and Zerg just plummets 100 supply more than the Protoss army does. It's really difficult to see, right? So underneath all of those Skytools units, we had a lot of the Archons. And the Archons deal splash damage to clumped up units above them. They don't deal friendly fire or anything along those lines. And if the Corruptors are even remotely clumped, the Archons will absolutely destroy them. So the idea is that you jump the army there, so maybe Parasitic Bomb can help you out too. I don't know if actually Rogue had a Parasitic Bomb at the final engagement there, but I don't think it really would have mattered much. The idea is that if you jump in there, Parasitic Bomb can kill the interceptors and deal some supplemental damage too. And then obviously the Storm ability, I mean, you can still use it on the Corruptors, but Storm does deal friendly fire. If you end up storming the Corruptors, you end up storming your own units and you just take a lot of damage from that too. Ultimately though, yeah, Rogue took an opportunity. He had a lot of army units too. He was done trying to fish for an advantage, and Zoun just had a much better force. It's difficult to say. I'm not actually entirely sure that what Rogue could have done. Maybe he could have done what Serral likes to do, where you sit behind your layers of spore crawlers. It does kind of feel a bit lame though, right? When you sit behind like 50 spore crawlers and wait for the Protoss to come to you. I've never really liked that style. I mean, if you've been watching for a while, you probably know that I've never liked turtle play from any race. Be it Protoss, be it Terran, be it Zerg. Maybe that's the way to do it though for Zerg players right now. I'm not exactly sure. You could try and base race. The problem with base racing is that Brute Lords are pretty slow units. And Protoss has the mass recall towards their nexus. And then also the mass recall towards the mothership itself. So one of the answers that Zergs have historically employed is that they are just going to counterattack instead. Rather than actually ever deal with the opponent's army, they just counterattack. But that late game army for Protoss is way more mobile than the late game army for the Zerg. It's tricky. It is tricky. I may be wrong. But like, hypothetically speaking, I think if both players play perfect, right? Like say you had an artificial intelligence that played perfect StarCraft 2 up until like 500 APM or so. So not like, you know, you can technically have like 1,000,000 APM. But if you have like two near perfect players, 500 APM, I think Protoss wins almost every time. That might be me being biased, but I'm not sure if you can really win the late game as a Zerg player. Unless Protoss makes a pretty significant blunder. Now keep in mind that Rogue did not have all of his upgrades done. So those Corruptors did take extra damage. Maybe if they would have stayed alive for an extra shot or two from those Archons, they could have actually cleared out like another few of the flying units there for the Protoss. I mean, maybe they could have, yeah. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. And I fully admit that I might be slightly biased here too, because as a Zerg player, I've been struggling against Skytos for years now. Never been confident against it. Now this is a major misplay from Zoun. Ay, ay, ay. He lost an Oracle there for nothing. Like, that was a very sloppy bit of micro right there from Protoss. He just flew into the Spore Crawler and the Queen and dealt no damage. Okay. One of the reasons I say that, though, is that in theory, the Infestors and the Vipers should both get nullified by the High Templar. Like, that's one of the things I always try to emphasize, I suppose. Like, theoretically, I know that High Templar are slow and they're kind of clumsy and all that. But theoretically, you can actually kill basically every single one of those units with feedback. So, Zerg Spellcasters should all be nullified quite nicely. And that is one of the nice things, too, for Protoss in the late game. Like, you don't really need multiple Spellcasters. I guess the mothership itself is a spellcaster, but you don't really need to micro that very diligently, whereas Zerg needs to be microing both the Vipers as well as the Infestors. It is all a little bit clumsy. Queens also, I guess. Not something to be forgotten about. It's tricky, man. Ultimately, I think what you need to do as a Zerg player is just play like Serral. Just play like Serral, and everything will be fine. Alright, so it's going to be Oracles here into a bunch of Glaive Adepts. Similar build here from Zoun as what we saw in the previous game, but this time around it is a significantly weaker setup because, well, he lost an Oracle. Oracles are so important, man. Ooh, did Zerg actually see the move out here? No, Rogue has not seen the Adepts at all. He's making a lot of units at this point in time, though. He's already going into an Infestation Pit too, but he does not have any roaches available, and this Protoss army will get across the map pretty much entirely unscouted. Now he sees what's up. He starts up a bunch of roaches immediately. Can we wall this in? Can we wall this in? Nope, we cannot wall this in. And I don't know if this is enough links. No, it definitely is not. Man, Zoun's such a cheeky man. Very confident at playing the late game. YOLO's in an Oracle for no apparent reason at all, and then goes for the identical follow-up that he did in the previous game. This is by no means his only build. This is a Protoss player who's perfectly capable of dozens of early game builds. And he decides to just do the same freaking thing multiple times in a row. Makes himself look like a one-trick pony, but that is not what he is. We saw a Nidus Worm at least attempt it there. Stasis Ward goes down. Okay. All of the Adepts will ultimately fall. And actually, the second Oracle also died. Dude, Zoun, why have we given up so many units? In total, though, he has killed 18 drones and 26 links, too. Swarm Hosts! Okay, yeah, we're going Nidus Swarm Host, I guess, on the back of this right now for Rogue, who feels like he needs to get something done in the next few minutes. Very low on gas, though. He decides to make Swarm Host and then a bunch of Zerglings. Can't afford a Nidus network anymore. But you know what? I kind of like the decision here to go Swarm Host, because Swarm Host games rarely go the distance. They're going to force a lot of attention here. I'm trying to shut down the Zerg army before it really gets legs. And, well, in the Roach's case, I guess they have 6 each. How many legs do Swarm Hosts have? Probably about 6 too, man. No, just 4. Dang. All right, Nidus Network on the back of this. How many legs do Zerglings have? Just 4 as well. Man, Roaches actually have a lot of legs. Hydras have 1 leg. That's why they called me Hydralist in college. Anyways. No. Which Zerg unit has the most legs? Queens? No, Queens have 6. Well, technically she has 6, but she's got like 2 little arms there too, and then the 2 little, you know, T-Rex arms right over there at the front. I guess we can call these, we can all, yeah, these are all legs in my mind. They have 10 legs, dude. Brenda wins again. How many legs does an Infestor have? Maybe all the Zerg units are, maybe their strength is based off of the amount of legs that they have, you know? Queens are phenomenal. Swarm Host kind of garbage. Queens have like 2.5 times as many legs. Coincidence? Okay, we got 1 gateway here. I mean, this looks kind of scary here for Protoss. He gets a gateway or 2, sure, whatever. It's the first waves, usually, that are the most important ones. And even though Rogue is leading the supply count right now, considering he's playing Roach Ravager Swarm Host, his supply is not where it should be. Zoun can chill here for a little bit. He doesn't even need to be aggressive. He's matching the opponent's supply, despite Rogue being, well, this heavy. And like, these units are extremely supply dense. Swarm Host wave once more gets activated. This time around, it's going to go after the Stalkers. He blinks away. Perfect execution here by Zoun. Yeah, and I think what we are witnessing here is a Zerg player desperately trying to do something. And it could just work. Like, there is a chance that this type of thing works, but it requires significant mix-ups here from Zoun. Like, Zoun could just chill and max out. I think if Zoun decides to sit back and max out, he is not going to be beatable. He's now up to 4 bases. He's got Storm done too, by the way, which is kind of insane. He's throwing water balloons instead with the High Templar, which is a stylistic choice. Bunch of units going in around this side as well. Zoun doesn't need to play like this, but I think he is having a grand old time, and he's cruising. We have another Locust Wave going into the main base. Can Rogue maybe even the odds with that? Well, it does mean that he's not going to have the Locust available for the main fight, and that is what Zoun is aiming for right now. Getting charged on the back of this too, blinks into his own Psionic Storm, but it does not matter. Ultimately, it is Zoun over here who obtains the victory in, well, what is ultimately looking like a pretty easy set of games for him, right? I mean, I feel like there were a couple of blunders on the side of the Protoss here, but across the board, he played really, really nice games. The second match, though, definitely not with the cleanest early game. Like, going for 2 Oracles and losing the both of them to a bunch of Queens, not ideal. But he ultimately, well, managed to get across the map with, like, I don't know, 12.5 or so Adepts, completely unscouted, and they just dealt so much damage.